The room was quiet, save for the soft, mournful hum of the wind outside. A small chapel tucked away at the edge of town served as the final resting place for Ava Hart, a mother whose life had been tragically cut short. She had been loved by so many, her death leaving a hole in the hearts of those who knew her. Among the mourners was her 10-year-old son, Liam, who had always been her brightest joy, the one person who had always made her smile, no matter what the day held. But today, everything felt different. Liam stood by his mother's coffin, his small hands gripping the edge, his face a mixture of sorrow and defiance. The service had ended, and people had begun to file out, offering their condolences to the grieving family. But Liam didn't move. His eyes were locked onto his mother's face through the glass, his body stiff, as though he couldn't bear to look away. "Liam, sweetie, it's time to go." His grandmother, standing behind him, whispered gently, her voice filled with concern. She had been the one to take him to the chapel, hoping that somehow this would bring him peace. But it was clear that no amount of peace could reach him. Liam didn't respond. His little fingers remained clenched around the edge of the coffin, his eyes never leaving the serene face of his mother. His grandmother, in her late 60s and frail with age, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, urging him to move. But the weight of his grief was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. "Liam, we need to go now." Her voice wavered, and there was a sharp edge of desperation in her tone. She was beginning to fear for him. This was no ordinary grief. It felt like something deeper, something that refused to let him go. But Liam only shook his head, his voice barely audible. "I can't leave her. She won't be alone." His words broke her heart, but at the same time she understood. This was her only child's last gift to her, a promise to never leave his mother's side, even in death. As the minutes passed, more of the family members began to leave, some casting concerned glances at Liam, others murmuring among themselves about how to approach the boy. But no one dared to interrupt him. It was as if he was in a world of his own, standing alone with the memory of his mother, refusing to let go. "Liam, honey." His grandmother tried again, but her words were lost in the heavy silence that filled the chapel. It was as though the entire room was holding its breath, waiting, watching, for something more. Then, just as she was about to reach out to him once more, something unexpected happened. A soft glow seemed to emerge from the coffin, faint at first, like the light of a candle flickering in a dark room. Liam's eyes widened, his small body stiffening as the air around him seemed to change. His grandmother, standing a few steps away, gasped, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. The glow grew brighter, and suddenly Liam's hand, which had been clutching the edge of the coffin, moved. Slowly it lifted, reaching out toward the center of the coffin, as if guided by an unseen force. The room was frozen in time. Everyone in the chapel stood still, unable to move or speak, watching the unbelievable unfold before them. And then, as if responding to his touch, the light enveloped Liam, and for a brief moment, the room filled with a sense of overwhelming peace. The glow didn't just come from the coffin. It was as though the light came from within Liam himself, radiating from his heart. He blinked, confused at first. But then his face softened. It was as if something had shifted within him, something that had been impossible just moments before. "Mom?" Liam whispered, his voice trembling, but filled with a deep, knowing peace. "Are you still here?" And just like that, everything seemed to stop. The soft whisper of the wind through the windows, the faint hum of the distant city, everything paused. The glow surrounding Liam seemed to intensify for a brief moment, wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. His grandmother watched, wide-eyed and stunned, as the air in the room began to shift. It wasn't just the light, it was a palpable sensation, a feeling that something extraordinary was happening, something that couldn't be explained by logic or reason. For a few moments, everything in the chapel seemed to hold its breath. The once heavy atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and serenity that filled every corner of the room. The sound of the wind outside no longer seemed as cold or mournful. It was as if the entire world outside had softened, waiting for the miracle to take its course. Liam's small, trembling fingers hovered over the edge of the coffin, his gaze fixed on his mother's face. His lips parted as if he was about to say something, but no words came out. Instead, a tear slipped down his cheek, the only sign that he understood the magnitude of what was happening. The stillness of the chapel was profound, almost sacred. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light flickered and faded away, leaving behind a sense of calm and quiet that had not been there before. Liam lowered his hand from the coffin and stepped back slowly, looking up at his grandmother. There were no words at first, just the sound of his breathing and the soft rustling of his clothing. But his expression had changed. His face was no longer consumed by grief, but filled with a quiet acceptance. "Grandma, she's okay." Liam's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of something miraculous. His grandmother stood frozen, trying to process what had just occurred, but the peace in Liam's eyes told her everything she needed to know. What? What just happened?" Her voice was shaky, still trying to make sense of it. She had watched her beloved daughter buried just hours ago, her only child, and yet here was her grandson, who had refused to leave his mother's side, witnessing a moment no one could have predicted. Liam didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned back to the coffin, his gaze lingering on his mother's peaceful face. For a moment, it seemed like he was having a silent conversation with her, his lips moving as if he were whispering his own words of comfort. And then, just as calmly as he had spoken before, Liam turned back to his grandmother. "She's not gone, Grandma. She's still here. I know it. She's with me." The words were simple, but they were filled with an undeniable certainty. Tears welled in his grandmother's eyes as she finally knelt down beside him. "You've seen something, haven't you, Liam?" she asked gently, her voice a mix of awe and love. Liam nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "She's watching over us. She's still here. I felt it. She told me she'll always be with me, even though I can't see her." His grandmother placed her hands on his shoulders, feeling the weight of his words. She had lost so much, her daughter, her own flesh and blood. And yet here was her grandson, showing her something beyond understanding, something that felt like hope in its purest form. I think you're right, Liam," she whispered, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. "Your mother will always be with you." As they stood together, the chapel felt different. It was no longer a place of mourning. It had transformed into a place of quiet reverence, where the boundaries between life and death seemed to blur. The miracle wasn't just in what Liam had seen, it was in the love and connection that could never truly be severed. No matter the distance, no matter the circumstances. And as Liam turned to leave, hand in hand with his grandmother, he knew that the bond between him and his mother would always remain, beyond life and death, a force that could never be broken. As they left the chapel, the weight of the day seemed to lift, though the grief still lingered in the air. The wind had picked up, but there was a strange calmness to it, as though the world itself was quietly whispering its condolences. Liam walked beside his grandmother, his small hand held tightly in hers. He had grown up so quickly in these last few hours. Something inside him had shifted, something he couldn't yet explain. The miracle he had experienced in the chapel, what he had felt, the peace that had washed over him, was still fresh in his mind. The light, the presence, the quiet whisper that had filled the room. It had been as if his mother had reached out to him, not through words but through a feeling, through a bond stronger than death. He hadn't understood it completely, but he knew. She was still with him. That was enough. His grandmother looked down at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. It was a smile tinged with both sadness and wonder. Could it be possible? Could a mother's love truly transcend the boundaries of death? Liam broke the silence, his voice soft but filled with newfound strength. "Grandma, I don't think I'm alone anymore." His eyes sparkled with an intensity she hadn't seen before, as if he had unlocked something inside himself. His grandmother's heart ached, but she nodded. "I know, Liam." She squeezed his hand gently. "She's always with you." As they walked toward the car, ready to leave the chapel behind and head back to the house, Liam stopped suddenly. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, on the setting sun. It was as though he could see something in the distance, something only he could see. "Grandma, there's something I need to do." Liam's voice was filled with quiet certainty. I need to tell people that Mom is still with me. I need them to know what happened today. His grandmother stopped in her tracks. Liam, are you sure? It's a lot to ask. People might not understand. But Liam wasn't worried about that. He had seen something real, something powerful, something no one could take away from him. I know what I saw, Grandma. I know what I felt. His voice was unwavering. His grandmother took a deep breath. There was a sense of wisdom in his words, a strength that came from something beyond his years. You're right, she said, her voice softening. We can't hide what's true, even if it's hard for others to understand. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. It was the end of one chapter, but for Liam, it felt like the beginning of something more. Back at the house, the atmosphere was different. The once somber air had been replaced with a quiet reverence. Liam no longer felt the overwhelming sadness that had weighed him down earlier. His mother's passing, though still a loss he would carry forever, had been tempered by something greater, a sense of peace, a sense of connection that had bridged the gap between life and death. Later that evening, as the house grew dark and the family gathered in the living room, Liam stood up. All eyes turned to him as he walked to the center of the room, his gaze steady. I need to tell you all something. His voice was calm but filled with the weight of what he had experienced. He stood taller than he had just hours ago, as though the miracle had given him something more, something intangible, yet profound. Mom is still with us. She came to me today. She told me she's not really gone. A hushed silence fell over the room. The family exchanged confused glances. It wasn't that they didn't believe Liam. It was that they couldn't understand how this was possible. How could a young boy know something so deep, so undeniable? But Liam wasn't shaken. He stood firm, his gaze unwavering. I know it sounds strange, but I felt it. She's with me. She'll always be with us, no matter what. His grandmother stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Liam's telling the truth, she said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet assurance. I felt it too. For a moment, no one spoke. The family, despite their confusion, sensed the truth in the room. The grief they had been carrying, though still there, was now intertwined with something else. It was as if hope had been rekindled in a place they hadn't expected. Liam turned toward the window, his hand still resting on his mother's photograph. She's not gone. Not really. She's just in a different place now, watching over us. His voice was steady, strong. It was as if he had become a vessel of peace for them all, sharing a message of comfort that had come to him in a way none of them could have anticipated. The days that followed were marked by a quiet, almost surreal calmness. Liam's newfound sense of peace seemed to spread through the house like a healing balm, though the grief was still present. His grandmother watched him closely, her heart filled with both concern and admiration for her grandson. How could a child so young bear such weight with such serenity? She wondered if he truly understood the power of what he had experienced, or if he had simply been the vessel for something much larger than he could comprehend. As the family gathered for dinner that evening, there was a palpable shift in the room. Everyone was still trying to make sense of Liam's claim, that his mother's spirit was still with them. But it wasn't just the words that had made an impact. It was the feeling that lingered in the air when Liam spoke. It was as if the room itself had been touched by something inexplicable, something deeply spiritual. Liam sat at the head of the table, a small but steady presence. His hands, usually restless and fidgeting, were now calm. He seemed to carry an inner peace that others couldn't quite explain. His eyes were brighter, more focused, as if he had unlocked a deeper understanding of the world, of life, death, and the invisible threads that connected them all. As the conversation turned to the events of the day, the family exchanged glances, unsure of how to approach the subject. How could they respond to Liam's words? They had all seen the grief in his eyes, but now there was something else, something beyond sorrow. Liam's grandmother finally broke the silence, her voice gentle but firm. Liam believes in something greater. He believes that his mother's spirit is still with us, and I believe him. Her eyes scanned the room, meeting each family member's gaze. I've felt it too, and I think we should honor that belief. The room fell silent again. No one disagreed, but there was a quiet hesitation. How could they accept something so unbelievable, so beyond comprehension? Yet as they looked at Liam, their doubts began to melt away. His peace was undeniable, a peace that seemed to transcend his grief, something that couldn't be explained by mere words. I feel her too. It was Liam's cousin, a young woman in her 20s, who spoke up. She had been quiet, watching Liam closely over the past few days. I don't know what happened, but I feel like she's still here. Like, she's not truly gone. She paused, her eyes softening. I can't explain it, but I feel it too. Liam's grandmother smiled softly. We're all feeling it in our own way. We're all part of this journey together. Her voice was warm, filled with both sadness and hope. And maybe in time, we'll all understand more. The conversation shifted after that. There were no more questions about the miracle Liam had witnessed. There was no need for explanations or arguments. For the first time since Ava's death, the family found themselves talking openly, sharing stories of the past, of the moments they had shared with Ava, her kindness, her laughter, and the way she had always been the light in their lives. Liam's heart swelled with something deep and unspoken. He could hear his mother's voice, soft and loving, like it had been that morning in the chapel. He could almost see her standing there, smiling at him. He was not alone, and he knew that now. His mother's love was still with him, and in a way it had become something greater than just memory. It had become a presence, a force that guided him, helped him find peace amidst the storm. After dinner, Liam returned to his room, feeling lighter than he had in days. He sat on the edge of his bed, the photograph of his mother still close by. His fingers traced the outline of her face in the picture, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He could still feel her warmth, as if she were right there beside him, watching over him, just as she had promised. The night fell silent, but the air felt different. It felt alive with love, with hope. Liam knew that his mother had not left him, and that knowledge was a comfort he would carry for the rest of his life. As the days passed, the weight of grief that had once consumed Liam began to lift. The peace he felt from that moment in the chapel, the light and the presence of his mother's spirit, remained with him, like a constant companion guiding him through each day. His grandmother, too, had found a new sense of calm, though she would never stop missing her daughter. But the knowledge that Ava's love was still alive, still protecting them, gave her the strength to carry on. Liam had become more attuned to the world around him. He began speaking more openly about his experiences, telling the family about the peace he had felt when he reached out to his mother's coffin. He told them about the light, the feeling of being held in her arms once more. They listened quietly, no longer questioning but accepting. What Liam had felt was beyond their understanding, but it didn't need to be understood to be real. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting an orange glow over the yard, Liam stood on the porch, looking out into the distance. He could still feel his mother's presence beside him, in the rustling of the leaves and the gentle breeze. She was everywhere. The love she had given him, the lessons she had taught him, the way she had sacrificed for him. It was like a presence that would never fade, never leave. He closed his eyes and whispered to the air, his voice soft, filled with emotion. I'll be okay, Mom. I promise. In the distance, a bird fluttered by, its wings cutting through the quiet air like a soft sigh. Liam felt it, the sense that his mother had heard him, that her love was still wrapped around him like a warm blanket. His heart felt full, like he had been given something priceless, something that could never be taken away. Later that evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Liam sat among them, his small face glowing with a quiet confidence. There were no longer any tears. The sorrow had been replaced by a soft sense of peace, as though the impossible had happened and the world was once again whole. Liam's grandmother sat beside him, her arm around his shoulders, gazing at the photo of Ava on the mantel. She's with us, isn't she? She said softly. Liam nodded, his eyes bright with certainty. She's always with us, Grandma. I know she is. The family sat in silence for a long moment, each of them lost in their own thoughts, but united in a single truth, that love never truly dies. Ava's memory, her presence, her spirit, would live on forever in their hearts. And Liam, with his newfound strength and his connection to something greater than himself, would carry that love forward. As the room grew darker, the last of the daylight slipping away, there was a soft, almost imperceptible glow in the corner of the room. It wasn't the light from a lamp, nor was it the flicker of the fireplace. It was something different, something spiritual, something that made the room feel alive, like it was radiating warmth. And for the briefest moment, they could almost hear the faintest whisper, a soft, loving voice that said, "I'm here, always." Liam smiled, his heart full, and closed his eyes. He had found peace, not just in his mother's memory, but in the belief that love transcended death, that connections could never truly be severed.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.